Can I ask you a question? When was the last time you asked your own mind for evidence? Not someone else's, your own. Because most of us do something rather strange. If a stranger told us something unbelievable, we'd ask for proof. If a news story sounded questionable, we'd fact check it. If a friend made a bold claim, we'd probably say, "How do you know?" But when our own mind quietly whispers, "You're too old, you're not creative, you'll probably fail. People like you don't do things like that." We rarely stop and ask, is that actually true? And maybe that's one of the most important questions we'll ever investigate. Today, I don't want to convince you to believe anything new. I don't want to replace one belief with another. I simply want to investigate something we've probably never stopped to examine. Why do some beliefs feel like facts, even when we've never tested them? Here's something that I've been wondering. What if confidence isn't believing more? What if confidence begins by questioning more? Because somewhere along the way, many of us stopped investigating our own thinking. We simply accepted it, not because it was proven, but because it was familiar. And familiar has a strange way of feeling like truth. Here's something I find fascinating. Your mind can repeat the same sentence for years without ever questioning if it's true. Think about that. Repetition isn't evidence, it's just repetition. But after hearing something long enough, our brain often stops asking whether it's true. It simply starts feeling like reality. Let's say someone believes, "I'm terrible with money." Interesting. How do they know that? Was it one mistake, two, 10? Or did someone say that to them years ago and they never questioned it? If one bad experience is enough to prove that we're incapable, then one good experience should be proof that we're exceptional. But we don't think that way, do we? We remember the evidence that supports the belief and quietly ignore the evidence that challenges it. Not because we're weak, because once the mind accepts a story, it naturally begins looking for proof that that story is correct. What if you've spent years collecting evidence for a conclusion that was never actually true? Imagine someone who tried to start a business once and it failed. They conclude, "I'm not an entrepreneur." Really? Or did one business fail? Those aren't the same statement. One describes an event, and the other creates an identity. And maybe that's something worth investigating. How often do we confuse what happened with who we are? What if the most limiting sentence in your life is simply an opinion you've mistaken for fact? The interesting thing about beliefs is that they rarely announce themselves. They don't say, "Hello, I'm just one possible perspective." They quietly disguise themselves as reality. That's why they're so powerful. not because they're always true, because they stop feeling optional. And maybe this isn't really about positive thinking. Maybe it's about intellectual honesty, being willing to say, I don't actually know if this belief is true. That isn't weakness, that's curiosity. And curiosity creates awareness, and awareness creates choice. And choice is where change begins. Today, I'd like you to finish one sentence. I believe blank. Now, don't defend it. Don't explain it. Investigate it. Ask yourself, what evidence supports this belief? And then ask, what evidence challenges it? And finally, ask, if someone that I loved believed this about themselves, would I accept it without any evidence? Or would I encourage them to look again? Maybe it's time that you offered yourself that same curiosity. Maybe the belief is true. Maybe it isn't. That's not really the point. The point is this: a belief should earn the right to guide your life, not simply inherit that position because it's familiar. So before today ends, ask yourself the question, is it actually true? Not because I think I have the answer, but because you're willing to investigate. Because every belief deserves to be questioned. Every belief deserves an investigation. Until next time, stay curious.